So we have a problem, and there were two parts to this problem. So the previous video answered the question of which one precipitates first, and we got this information from the prior video. So we have the original problem that gives us KSP values and tells us that we simply have a beaker with two different ions in it. So the second part of this question is, when the more soluble species begins to precipitate, what is the bromide concentration in solution? So to get this, you need to have a picture in your mind of what is happening. So we have a beaker and we have two different ions hanging out. To this, we are continually adding silver. So silver is being added over and over and over again. So part of what is happening is the moment some silver enters, that silver is going to find that bromide and form a precipitate. That's going to happen. And as that happens, you are going to be using up your bromide. You keep adding silver so that you just add as much silver as you want over and over and over again. So even though you are still adding silver and you are getting rid of silver because you are forming a solid, both of these things are happening at the same time. So even though you are going to lose silver into the solid, you are still physically adding it over and over, which means that you don't have an exact silver concentration because you are going to keep changing the silver concentration over time. And the amount of silver is also in part going to depend on things like the amount of bromide that you have left over, which is also changing. And that's part of what this question is getting at, is the fact that everything is in flux, everything's changing. But there would be a time where your more soluble species does start to precipitate because you've kept adding more silver and more and more and more. Well, we know what the silver concentration has to be to precipitate the more soluble species. That's this number. So we've just kept things moving right along. Now, we don't necessarily care how much solid we made. We don't. But what we know is we know how much silver we have. This is what we know. So a lot of that bromide probably has gone into a solid. We don't know how much, but we know that if this is my concentration of silver, which is that by the way the problem is stated, we know this has to be true. That means that there can only be so much bromide that can stand being in solution based on the KSP value. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our KSP value for bromide. So we're going to have my silver times my bromide concentration equaling the KSP value, 5.0 times 10 to the negative 13. And again, we know what the silver concentration has to be. Solved for that earlier. And we are just going to solve for bromide. Notice we don't care how much solid was formed. So you could ask a totally different question and ask something like, how much solid was formed? That would get you a limiting reactant kind of a thing. But that's not what they asked us here. They just want to know how much bromide is going to be in solution. And that's just going to be based on the amount of silver that you have, which again, they gave us that prompt by asking when the more soluble species precipitates. So hopefully this clears up some of the confusion with KSP. Good luck.